The wedding bells rang across the countryside church, their joyful chime floating into the September air, where leaves of gold and red drifted lazily from tall oaks. Inside, the pews filled with laughter and greetings, old friends embracing, cousins chasing each other between the rows. It was one of those weddings where everyone seemed to know everyone, except for a quiet man sitting in the back row, his hands folded tightly as though holding his whole world together. His name was Daniel Hart. Daniel had lived most of his 46 years working harder than most men ever should. A carpenter by trade, he spent his mornings fixing broken fences, sanding rough tables, and patching homes that could not afford brand new walls. His hands were scarred, his back bent with effort, and his shoes were worn to the soles. But despite his poverty, there was a softness in his eyes, the kind only men who had endured and still chosen kindness could carry. His teenage daughter, Lily, sat beside him, brushing the wrinkles from his old shirt, whispering, "Dad, you look handsome. Stop fidgeting." He smiled faintly, though his mind wandered. Weddings were bittersweet for him. They reminded him of what he once had, what he once dreamed of. Years ago, when he was a boy with hope in his chest and sawdust in his hair, he had fallen deeply in love. Her name was Emily Rhodes. She had been his high school sweetheart, the girl who sang in the choir and always smelled faintly of lavender. They had planned a future together once, talking about little houses and children, until life intervened. She had gone off to college in the city, chasing ambition, while Daniel had stayed behind, bound by duty when his father grew sick. Letters stopped, time passed, and so did the chance at a shared life. He hadn't thought of Emily in years, or at least he tried not to. Poverty leaves little room for nostalgia. But as the music shifted and the bride began her slow walk down the aisle, Daniel felt a strange pull, as if fate was whispering that this wedding would not be ordinary. The ceremony carried on beautifully, filled with vows and tears, and when the couple finally kissed, the guests erupted into cheers. The reception spilled into the nearby hall, decorated with string lights and wildflowers. Daniel followed, feeling out of place in his threadbare jacket among men in tailored suits and women in shimmering dresses. He told Lily to enjoy herself and watched her run to the dance floor with her friends. For a moment, he stood in the corner with a paper cup of punch, reminding himself that he belonged there only because an old friend had insisted he attend. And then, he saw her. Across the room, framed by laughter and candlelight, stood Emily Rhodes. Her hair, though touched with faint silver, still fell gracefully around her shoulders. Her eyes, bright as they were at 17, scanned the room until they landed on him. For a heartbeat, Daniel forgot how to breathe. She looked different, elegant, confident, dressed in a gown that could pay off his mortgage 10 times over, but it was undeniably her. Emily's lips parted in disbelief, then curved into a trembling smile. She excused herself from a circle of admirers and walked toward him, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. Daniel's heart hammered. What could he say? What could he offer, a poor man with calloused hands, to a woman who seemed carved out of another world? Daniel Hart, she whispered when she reached him, her voice carrying both shock and tenderness. After all these years. Emily, he said, his throat tight. I almost didn't recognize you. They stood there, suspended in a silence that held decades of lost time. For a moment, they were not middle-aged strangers, but two teenagers again, standing at the edge of a county fair, dreaming of forever. But life had been cruel in its symmetry. Daniel's eyes fell to the gold bracelet around her wrist, the flawless diamond necklace that caught the light. Everything about her spoke of wealth and power. She was not the girl who once held his hand by the riverbank. She was someone far beyond him now. He felt an ache in his chest and looked away, embarrassed by his own roughness, the grease still embedded under his fingernails. "How have you been?" she asked softly. Daniel forced a smile. "Busy. Life has its way of keeping a man working. This is my daughter, Lily." Lily, curious, came bouncing over, her youthful innocence cutting through the tension. Emily bent down, her eyes misting as she spoke to the girl. "You have his eyes," she whispered, and Lily giggled. The conversation might have ended there. Two old lovers sharing polite words before drifting apart again. But Emily lingered. She insisted Daniel sit with her at dinner, insisted they catch up. Throughout the evening, she asked about his work, his life, his struggles, as though every detail mattered. Daniel, though hesitant, found himself speaking honestly. He told her about his wife who had passed years ago, about raising Lily alone, about barely scraping by. Emily listened, but beneath her graceful smile, her heart ached. She too had walked a path of loneliness. Though she was one of the wealthiest businesswomen in the country, with companies in her name and her face in magazines, she carried a hollowness no one saw. Her marriages had crumbled, her so-called friends had betrayed her, and she lived in a mansion filled with silence. She had chased the world and caught it, only to realize it did not fill the void. That night, as music swirled around them, she excused herself briefly and stepped outside. Alone beneath